She walked until her shoes split open, until the snow covered her shoulders, until the firelight from a forgotten cabin stopped her heart cold. The Missouri sky had been steel gray when Nora Callan slipped from her father's house 3 days past. Now, lost somewhere in the Wyoming territory, the heavens pressed down like a frozen shroud. Each step forward required more strength than the last, her torn dress offering no protection against the bitter wind that cut through the pines. Her fingers had gone numb hours ago. The delicate shoes meant for parlor floors had given way to the harsh reality of frozen earth and hidden stones. Blood mixed with snow in her footprints, but she dared not stop. Behind her lay a fate worse than death marriage to Cornelius Blackwood, a man whose wealth matched only his cruelty. Her father had already spent the bride price. The wedding dress hung waiting in her room like a white flag of surrender. But Nora had not surrendered. She had run. The storm grew fiercer as darkness fell. Ice crystals stung her face like tiny needles. Her body shook violently, no longer under her control. When her knees finally buckled, she crawled forward through the drifts, driven by something deeper than thought. Pure, animal survival. Then she saw it, a flicker of orange light through the trees. Hope gave her strength she didn't know remained. She stumbled toward the glow, crashing through low branches that tore at her hair and clothes. The light grew stronger, revealing the outline of a small cabin tucked against a hillside. Smoke curled from its chimney, disappearing into the white void above. Nora reached the door and collapsed against it. Her frozen hands fumbled for purchase on the rough wood. She managed 3 weak knocks before her strength failed entirely. Silence. Then, from within, a voice, deep as winter thunder, rough as unplaned timber, leave now, or stay forever. The words hung in the air like a challenge, or a warning. Nora pressed her forehead against the door. She had no strength left to leave, no place left to go. Her fingers found the latch unlocked. The door swung inward with a groan, spilling her onto the cabin floor. Warmth hit her like a physical blow. The contrast between the frozen hell outside and the blessed heat within made her cry out. Through tears she couldn't control, she saw him. He stood by the fireplace, backlit by flames. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that hadn't seen scissors in months. A beard covered the lower half of his face, but couldn't hide the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. He wore simple clothes, wool shirt, canvas pants, leather boots worn soft with use. In his hand, a rifle rested easy as breathing. He didn't point it at her, just watched with eyes the color of winter bark. "I said leave now," he repeated, quieter this time, "or stay forever." Nora tried to speak, but only managed to croak. Her throat felt lined with sand. She pushed herself up on trembling arms, met his gaze directly. Something flickered in those dark eyes, surprise, perhaps that she didn't cower. Moving with painful slowness, she reached behind her and pulled the door closed. The latch clicked into place with finality. "Then I stay," she whispered. For a long moment, neither moved. The fire crackled. Wind howled against the walls like a living thing trying to claw its way inside. The man, for she didn't know his name, yet set the rifle carefully against the wall. "Figured as much," he said. "Nobody comes this far into nowhere unless they're running from something worse than dying." He moved then, not toward her, but to a trunk in the corner. From it he pulled a thick wool blanket, which he tossed in her general direction. It landed just out of reach. "Dry yourself. Change if you've got anything. If not..." He gestured vaguely at the trunk. "My late wife's things. Take what fits." "Late wife." The words registered dimly as Nora crawled toward the blanket. Her fingers barely functioned as she wrapped it around her shoulders. The wool smelled of cedar and smoke. "There's stew," he continued, still not looking at her directly. "Rabbit. 3 days old, but it'll fill your belly. Water in the kettle for washing." He grabbed his coat from a peg by the door, heavy canvas lined with fur. "I'll be in the barn. Got animals to tend." He paused at the threshold. "Name's Calder Reeve. This is my place, my rules. You want to stay, you work, you want charity, you picked the wrong cabin." Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. Nora sat alone on the rough wooden floor, shaking not from cold now, but from the magnitude of what she'd done. She'd traded one prison for another, perhaps, but this one she'd chosen. That had to count for something. Moving carefully, testing each limb, she made her way to the trunk. Inside lay folded clothes, simple but well made. A blue wool dress, undergarments, heavy stockings. At the bottom, wrapped in paper, a pair of sturdy boots. She changed slowly, her frozen fingers struggling with buttons and laces. The clothes fit well enough. The boots were slightly large but blissfully warm. As feeling returned to her extremities, pain came with it sharp, electric jolts that made her gasp. The stew pot hung over the fire. She found a bowl and the spoon on a shelf, served herself with shaking hands. The first spoonful burned her mouth, but she didn't care. It was sustenance, life itself flowing back into her body. As she ate, she studied the cabin. One room, but well built. The logs fit tight, no drafts except near the door. A bed in one corner, covered with a bearskin. A table and 2 chairs. Shelves holding preserves, dried goods. A few books. Everything neat, orderly, but with the particular emptiness of a place where someone was missing. His late wife. How long ago, how had she died? The clothes in the trunk showed care folded precisely, stored with lavender that still gave off a faint scent. A woman cherished, mourned. The door crashed open. Calder returned in a swirl of snow, shaking himself like a great bear. His eyes found her immediately, taking in the borrowed clothes, the empty bowl in her hands. "You ate. Good." He hung up his coat, knocked snow from his boots. "You got a name, or should I just call you Woman Who Won't Leave?" "Nora." Her voice came stronger now. "Nora Callan." "Well then, Nora Callan." He moved to the fire, added another log. "Here's how this works. You want to stay, you earn it. Cooking, cleaning, mending, whatever needs doing. I don't talk much. Don't expect you to, neither. We leave each other be. We'll get along fine." He turned to face her fully then, and she saw something in his expression, not kindness exactly, but a bone-deep weariness that recognized its own kind. "I don't know what you're running from," he continued. "Don't much care. But if trouble follows you here, you'll face it alone. I'm done fighting other people's battles." Nora set down the bowl, straightened her spine. "I'm not asking you to fight for me. Just for a roof until spring, I'll work. I'm not afraid of hard labor. Spring's 3 months away, maybe 4. Then I'll work 3 months, maybe 4. Something that might have been respect flashed in his eyes. He nodded once, sharp. "Bed's mine," he said. "You take the floor by the fire. There's more blankets in the trunk. Mornings start early. You'll learn the routine quick enough or you'll freeze." He moved toward his bed, began pulling off his boots. Nora spread blankets on the floor, making herself a pallet. The silence between them felt oddly comfortable, 2 people who understood that some things didn't need words. As she settled down, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. But before sleep took her, she heard him speak once more. So quiet, she almost missed it. "Callan, heard that name before? Missouri merchant family. Rich folk." She didn't answer, didn't need to. "Well," he said after a moment, "we all got our reasons for being in the middle of nowhere." The fire popped. Wind rattled the windows. And Nora Callan, who had walked until her shoes split open, until the snow covered her shoulders, until she thought she would die rather than submit, closed her eyes and slept her first night of freedom on a stranger's floor. She had closed the door behind her. There was no going back now. The rooster's crow came before dawn, but Nora was already awake. The fire had died to embers during the night, leaving the cabin cold enough to see her breath. She rose quietly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, and set about rebuilding the flames. Calder stirred in his bed but didn't speak. She felt his eyes on her as she worked, measuring, evaluating. When the fire blazed strong again, she found the water bucket empty. "Well's out back," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Paths marked with rope. Don't let go of it in the snow." She nodded, pulled on the borrowed coat, and ventured into the pre-dawn darkness. The cold hit like a physical assault, stealing her breath, but true to his word, a rope stretched from the door to the well, giving her a lifeline through the swirling white. When she returned, struggling with the full bucket, he was up and dressed. He took the bucket from her without comment, poured water into the kettle for coffee. Their movements became a careful dance, two people learning to share space without collision. Breakfast was simple. Biscuits from yesterday, hard as stones until dunked in coffee, salt pork fried crisp. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the walls. "Animals need tending," Calder said when they finished. "You know anything about livestock?" "I can learn." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Get dressed warm. Barn's not far, but in this weather, not far can kill you." They made their way through the snow, following another guide rope. The barn materialized from the white void like a ship from fog. Inside, the air hung thick with the warmth of animals, 2 cows, a handful of chickens, and a sturdy bay horse who nickered at their arrival. "This is Bourbon," Calder said, running a hand along the horse's neck. "Ornery as they come, but he's saved my hide more than once." He showed her how to fork hay, scatter grain for the chickens, collect eggs without getting pecked. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, but Nora noticed how he favored his left side, how certain movements made him wince. "You're hurt," she observed. He stiffened. "Old injury, nothing that concerns you." But when he reached for a hay bale, she saw him falter. Without thinking, she moved to help, taking half the weight. He looked ready to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "Apache arrow," he said quietly. 4 winters back, healed wrong. She wanted to ask more, but sensed the door closing on that subject. They finished the chores in renewed silence. Back in the cabin, the day stretched before them. Calder settled at the table with a harness that needed mending. Nora explored the shelves, finding supplies for baking. She'd learned kitchen work not from choice, but necessity. Her mother had died young, leaving her to manage her father's household. "I could make bread," she offered, "if you have flour." He gestured toward a barrel in the corner. "Help yourself to whatever, just make it last. Town's a 2-day ride when the weather clears, longer if it doesn't." She set to work, grateful for the familiar task. Kneading dough gave her hands purpose, her mind focus. Calder worked his leather, occasionally glancing her way. The silence between them began to feel less like emptiness and more like understanding. "Your wife?" Nora ventured as she shaped loaves. "Did she make bread?" His hand stilled on the harness. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Eleanor," he said finally. "Yes, every other day. Regular as clockwork. House always smelled of it." "How long?" 3 years come spring." He resumed his work, each movement deliberate. "Fever took her. Nothing I could do but watch." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled, compressed into something manageable. Nora understood that kind of pain, the kind you carried because putting it down meant admitting defeat. "I'm sorry," she said simply. He shrugged. "Life out here takes more than it gives. You learn to accept it or it breaks you." As the bread rose near the fire, Nora found other work. The cabin, while neat, showed a bachelor's neglect in small ways. Dust in corners, windows hazed with smoke, clothes that needed mending. She attacked these tasks with quiet efficiency, aware of Calder's watchful presence. "You don't have to prove yourself in one day," he said when she paused to rest. "I already said you could stay." "I'm not proving myself to you," she replied. "I'm proving it to me." That earned her the first expression that might have been approval. Lunch was leftover stew and fresh bread, still warm from baking. Calder ate 2 slices without comment, but she caught him closing his eyes as he chewed, savoring. The afternoon brought a lull in the storm. Weak sunlight filtered through the clouds, revealing a world transformed. Snowdrifts reached the windows, trees bent under white weight. "Might be the last break for days," Calder observed. "Need to bring in more wood." They worked together, him splitting logs with powerful swings, her stacking them against the cabin wall. The physical labor felt good honest in a way her life in Missouri never had. There, she'd been an ornament, a prize to be won or traded. Here, she had worth measured in completed tasks. As they worked, she caught him rubbing his side where the old arrow wound troubled him. "There's liniment," she said. In Cornelius's house. Our cook used to make it for the stable hands. Camphor and cayenne in bear grease. I know the recipe." He paused mid-swing. "Cornelius. That'd be Cornelius Blackwood." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Railroad money." He said it wasn't a question. "Heard stories about him. None of them good." "All of them true," she said quietly. "And worse besides." He split another log with unnecessary force. Man like that won't take kindly to losing what he considers his. I was never his. A bill of sale doesn't make ownership, whatever my father thinks. Law might disagree. Then the law is wrong. He set down the axe, looked at her directly. "That kind of thinking gets people hurt out here. And accepting what others decide for you gets you hurt everywhere," she shot back. They faced each other across the split wood, breath visible in the cold air. Then Calder did something unexpected. He almost smiled, just a slight lift at the corner of his mouth. But it transformed his face entirely. "Fair enough, Nora Callan, fair enough." Evening came early, darkness pressing against the windows by 4 o'clock. They ate dinner beans and salt pork, more bread, and settled into what was becoming routine. Him with harness work, her with mending from a pile she'd discovered. "Can't pay you," he said suddenly. "Want to be clear about that. Food and shelter's all I got to offer." "It's enough," she assured him. "More than enough." He nodded, seemed about to say more, then returned to his work. But the silence felt different now, warmer, like the space between old friends. As night deepened, exhaustion tugged at her bones. 2 days of hard travel and harder choices had taken their toll. She prepared her pallet by the fire, trying not to think about how many nights stretched ahead on the hard floor. "There's a cot," Calder said abruptly, "in the barn loft. Could bring it in tomorrow. Set it up in the corner. More proper than floor sleeping." The offer, small as it was, made her throat tight. "That would be... yes, thank you." He grunted acknowledgement, blew out the lamp. In the firelight, she saw him settle on his bed, still fully clothed except for boots. Ready for trouble, even here. "Calder," she said softly. "What?" "Why did you let me in, really?" Long silence. Then, "Man gets tired of talking to horses, even ornery ones like Bourbon." It wasn't the whole truth, she knew, but it was enough truth for now. "And why did you warn me?" she pressed. "Leave now or stay forever, why say that?" This time the silence stretched so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. But finally his voice came from the darkness, stripped of its usual guard. "Because anybody desperate enough to find this place deserves to know what they're choosing. This isn't just a cabin. Nora, it's a place people come to disappear. Some from the world, some from themselves. Once you stay, once you get used to the quiet and the empty," he trailed off. "It's hard to go back," she finished. "Impossible," he corrected. "I tried. After Eleanor, went to town, thought about heading east, starting over. But the noise, the people, all those eyes watching, I couldn't breathe. Came back here and knew I'd never leave again.
And you wanted me to know that before I chose?
Yes. She pulled the blanket higher, stared at the fire's dancing shadows. I knew the moment I closed that door, maybe even before, there's nothing back there for me but a different kind of prison. Then you chose right, he said. Good night, Nora. Good night, Calder. The wind picked up again, rattling the windows with renewed fury. But inside the cabin, wrapped in borrowed blankets on a stranger's floor, Nora felt safer than she had in years. She'd traded comfort for freedom, certainty for choice. And somewhere in the darkness, a man who'd warned her to leave was glad she'd stayed. The rhythm of their days settled into something almost peaceful. Wake before dawn. Tend the fire. Haul water. Feed animals. Work until dark. Sleep. Repeat. But within this simple pattern, small moments began to accumulate like snow against the windowsill. Nora learned Calder's habits without trying. How he always checked the rifle's load before opening the door. The way he favored chicory in his coffee, strong enough to float horseshoes. His tendency to whittle in the evenings, creating small animals from pine scraps that he'd toss into the fire when finished. He learned hers too, though he'd never admit to watching, how she hummed while kneading bread hymns mostly, but sometimes melodies he didn't recognize. The careful way she rationed supplies, making everything stretch, her trick of warming stones by the fire to tuck into bed, fighting the endless cold. They barely spoke, but silence became its own language. One evening, 2 weeks into her stay, Calder developed a fever. It came on sudden fine at dinner, burning by nightfall. He tried to wave off her concern, but when he stood to fetch water, his legs buckled. Nora caught him before he hit the floor, struggling under his weight. Bed, she ordered. Now. I'm fine, he growled, even as sweat beaded his forehead. You're not, and arguing wastes strength you don't have. Something in her tone cut through his stubbornness. He let her guide him to bed, collapsing heavy as felled timber. She pulled off his boots, covered him with every blanket she could find. His skin burned through the cloth when she checked his forehead. The fever had taken hold fast and mean. She'd seen it before winter fever. People called it, sometimes folks recovered, sometimes they didn't. Water, she said. You need water. She spent that night in constant motion, cooling his fever with snow-dampened cloths, forcing sips of water past his cracked lips. When he shivered, she piled on blankets. When he burned, she peeled them back. In his delirium, he talked. Fragments at first, commands to soldiers who weren't there. Warnings about Apache raids, then Eleanor's name, repeated like a prayer. His hands grasped at empty air, reaching for someone only he could see. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Should have been there. Should have. Hush, Nora whispered, wringing out another cloth. Rest now. But the fever had cracked something open in him, letting old pain spill out. He talked about the war, not the grand conflict between North and South, but the smaller, meaner wars fought on the frontier. Commands betrayed. Men lost to ambush. A captain who fled while his soldiers died. Held the line, he muttered. Held it alone. But they said I ran coward. They said, but I stayed. I stayed. Nora's hands stilled. This was the wound that had driven him to exile, deeper than any arrow could pierce. Not just Eleanor's death, but honor stripped away, reputation destroyed by lies. I know, she said softly. I know you stayed. Around midnight, the fever broke. His breathing eased. The burning receded. She allowed herself to sink into the chair beside his bed, exhaustion pulling at every bone. That's when he spoke clear, eyes focused on her face. Water. She helped him drink, supporting his head. When he finished, he studied her with something like wonder. You're still here. Where would I go? That's not what I meant. His voice came hoarse but steady. The things I said, the fever talk. You said nothing shameful, just truth. He closed his eyes. Truth's sometimes the most shameful thing there is. She wanted to argue, to tell him that bearing others' lies wasn't his sin. But she understood too well how shame could burrow deep, become part of your bones whether earned or not. Instead, she simply said, "Rest, I'll watch." All night. All night. He slept then, deep and healing. She kept her word, dozing fitfully in the chair but startling awake each time he stirred. By dawn, the crisis had passed. He woke clear-eyed, embarrassed by his weakness but unable to deny it. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, rose to start breakfast, but something had shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained had collapsed in the night, leaving them closer than either had intended. Over the following days, as Calder recovered his strength, that new closeness persisted, not in words they still spoke sparingly, but in smaller things. How he insisted she take the chair by the fire while he sat on a crate, the extra portion of meat that appeared on her plate at dinner, the wool mittens he left on her pillow without comment. She reciprocated in her own quiet ways, the liniment she made from memory, easing his old wound, patches sewn on clothes before holes appeared, small comforts introduced without fanfare, a cushion for his chair, curtains for the bare windows. 3 weeks into her stay, while organizing supplies, Nora found something unexpected. Tucked behind preserves on a high shelf sat a book leather-bound, worn smooth by handling. She pulled it down carefully. "Shakespeare," she breathed. "Complete works." Calder looked up from cleaning his rifle. "Eleanor's," he said. "She loved to read aloud in the evenings. Said it made the cabin feel less empty." Nora ran her fingers over the cover. "My mother had the same habit before she died." "How old were you?" 8, old enough to remember, young enough to still need her. He set down the rifle parts. "That why you ended up promised to Blackwood, no mother to protect you?" Father saw opportunity, a business alliance dressed up as marriage. She opened the book randomly, pages falling to King Lear. "I was merchandise, premium goods to be traded for maximum profit." "But you ran." "I ran." She looked up, met his eyes. "Just like you held the line, sometimes the brave choice looks like cowardice to those who weren't there." He absorbed that silently, then nodded toward the book. "You could read some, if you wanted. Been too long since these walls heard poetry." So it became their evening ritual. After dinner, dishes done, she would read while he worked leather or wood. Her voice filled the cabin with words of love and loss, betrayal and redemption. Sometimes she caught him with eyes closed, not sleeping but listening with his whole being. One night, deep into Measure for Measure, she paused mid-sentence. Calder had gone absolutely still, staring at the fire. "What is it?" "That line, about mercy." She found the passage. "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath." "Eleanor," he said slowly, "used to say that when I'd get angry, about the war, about what they did to my name." He rubbed his face. "I never had much mercy for the men who lied. Still don't. But she'd say holding on to hate was like drinking poison and expecting others to die." "Wise woman." "Yes." He stood abruptly. "I need to check the animals." He fled into the night, leaving Nora with the book and the echo of old pain. When he returned, she'd moved on to lighter scenes, letting Shakespeare's wit chase away shadows. The next morning brought the first real break in the weather. Sun emerged brilliant on fresh snow, making the world diamond bright. Calder announced they needed supplies from the root cellar, a separate dugout behind the cabin. They waded through hip-deep drifts, Nora following the path he broke. The cellar door was buried. They dug it free together. Inside, preserved food-lined shelves, Eleanor's work, still sustaining them 3 years gone. Loading a crate with potatoes and turnips. Nora noticed Calder had stopped moving. He stood staring at a particular shelf, face unreadable.
What is it?
He reached up, pulled down a small wooden box. Inside lay seeds, carefully labeled in feminine handwriting. Beans, squash, flowers. She was planning a bigger garden, he said quietly. Always talking about next year, next spring, next harvest. He closed the box. Never got her next anything. Nora touched his arm gently. Plant them. When spring comes, give her that next season she wanted. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. You'd help even if you might not? He stopped.
Might not stay to see them bloom.
She withdrew her hand.
I said I'd stay through spring. I keep my word. And after...
The question hung between them, heavy as the silence that followed, because neither knew the answer. Come spring, would the trails clear enough for her to truly disappear? Would Cornelia still be searching? Would she want to leave this strange, quiet life she'd stumbled into? Would Calder want her to stay? After is after, she said finally. Today we have potatoes to haul. He accepted the deflection, but the question lingered in the air between them. They finished loading supplies in silence, each lost in thoughts of springs to come. That night, as she read from The Tempest, Nora felt Calder watching her instead of the fire. When she glanced up, he didn't look away. What? Nothing, just... He shrugged. Cabin doesn't feel empty anymore. The simple statement hit her harder than any declaration could have. She ducked her head back to the book, reading on about magical islands and second chances, while firelight painted gold across the walls of their small, shared world. Neither spoke of it again. But that night, instead of banking the fire low, Calder built it up higher, ensuring her corner would stay warm through till dawn. The winter deepened, and with it came a rhythm they no longer questioned. Morning chores shared without discussion, meals taken in companionable quiet, evenings by the fire, her voice weaving stories while his hands shaped wood into useful thing spoons, bowls, a new handle for the water bucket. They moved around each other with practiced ease, two people learning the dance of shared space. When Nora reached for the coffee pot, Calder already had a cup waiting. When his old wound ached in the cold, she had liniment warming by the fire before he asked. It was during one of these ordinary moments that everything shifted. Nora was at the wash basin, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing his work shirt. The lye soap had reddened her hands, and she paused to flex fingers gone stiff with cold. Without thinking, Calder moved behind her, took the shirt from her grasp. "Let me," he said. "Your hands need rest." She turned. Surprised, they stood closer than they'd ever been while both fully aware. She could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the way his beard couldn't quite hide a small scar on his chin. "I can manage," she said, but her voice came out softer than intended. "I know you can." His hands still covered hers on the wet fabric. "That's not why I'm offering." Time stretched between them, taut as fiddle string. Then Calder stepped back, taking the shirt with him. He finished the washing while she dried her hands, both pretending the moment hadn't happened. But it had, and it colored everything after. Now when she read in the evenings, he watched her face instead of the fire. When he came in from chopping wood, she found herself noticing the breadth of his shoulders, the easy strength in his movements. They still barely spoke, but the silence had gained weight, substance. A week later, Nora decided to air out the heavy quilts. The sun had emerged weak but willing, and fresh air would do the bedding good. She stripped Calder's bed while he was in the barn, hauling the blankets outside. That's when she found it, a small leather journal, wedged between mattress and wall. Not hidden exactly, but private. She shouldn't look, knew she shouldn't. She looked. The first entries were dated 3 years back. Eleanor's final days. Calder's handwriting was cramped, desperate. Asterisk, February 3rd. Fever worse. Doc Matthews says there's nothing more to do. I told him he's wrong. Has to be wrong. Asterisk, February 5th. She asked me to read to her. Voice too weak. I can't make the words come right. She smiled anyway. Asterisk, February 8th. Gone. Dawn came and she didn't see it. House is too quiet. Keep thinking I hear her in the next room. Nora's throat tightened. She should stop reading. This wasn't meant for her eyes. But she turned another page. The entries grew sporadic. Months of emptiness between words. Asterisk May. Planted the garden. No point, but did it anyway. Asterisk September. Went to town. Mistake. They whisper when they think I can't hear. Coward, deserter. Let her die alone while he hid in the hills. All lies. But lies with legs travel faster than truth. Asterisk December. Easier to stay away. Let them think what they want. Dead men don't defend themselves, and I might as well be dead. The final entry was recent. Very recent. Asterisk January. Strange thing. Woman showed up in the storm. Thought about turning her away. Couldn't. House doesn't feel like a tomb anymore. Catch myself listening for her humming. Dangerous thinking, but can't seem to stop. Find what you are looking for. Nora spun around. Calder stood in the doorway. Expression unreadable. She still held the journal. Caught absolutely. I'm sorry. I was changing the bedding and it fell out and you read it. Not a question. She nodded, unable to lie. He crossed the room, took the journal from her hands. For a moment she thought he'd order her out, break this fragile thing they'd built. Instead, he sat on the bare mattress, suddenly looking older than his years. Now you know, he said simply. Know what? Why I warned you that first night. This place, it's not just a cabin. It's a grave. I've been living in it, waiting to join her. She sat beside him, careful not to touch. But you're not dead. Might as well be. You read what they think of me. Man without honor, without courage. Let my men die. Let my wife die. Hid up here like the coward they named me. That's not what I read. She kept her voice steady. Sure. I read about a man who fought fever like an enemy, who planted a garden with no hope of harvest because his wife would have wanted it, who carries grief like a stone but keeps walking anyway. He laughed, bitter. Pretty words don't change truth. Then let me tell you truth. She turned to face him fully. That first night, when I knocked, I heard your voice through the door. Leave now or stay forever. You could have stayed silent. Let me freeze. No one would have known or blamed you. Basic decency is rarer than gold and twice as precious. You took in a stranger, fed me, sheltered me, never asked for anything improper. That's not cowardice. That's honor of the highest kind. He stared at his hands. Eleanor used to say something similar, about how the world judges wrong, values the wrong things. Eleanor was right. Eleanor's dead. Yes. Nora stood, moved to the window. Outside, sun glinted off snow like scattered diamonds. But you're not, and neither am I. We're here, breathing, working, living. That has to count for something. Does it? She turned back. The night you were fevered, you talked about the ambush, about holding the line alone while your captain fled, about how they blamed you for surviving when you should have run too. His jaw tightened. Fever talk means nothing. It means everything, because even in delirium, your mind went to duty, to the men you tried to save. She returned to sit beside him, and this time she did touch just her hand over his. A coward would have forgotten, would have made himself the hero of the story. You torment yourself with what you couldn't change. That's not weakness, that's conscience. He stared at their joined hands like they were foreign objects. Why do you care? Why does it matter what I am? The question hung in the air. Why did she care? When had this scarred, silent man become more than just shelter from the storm? Because, she said slowly, I've been judged too. Found wanting by people who never looked deeper than surface. My father saw a daughter to sell. Cornelius saw a possession to own. The world saw a woman who should be grateful for any attention, any protection, no matter the cost. She squeezed his hand.
But you saw different. From that first night, you saw a person, flawed, desperate, but whole, worth basic dignity, worth trust.
Her voice dropped. Worth saving. He turned his hand palm up, fingers intertwining with hers. Nora! I know what they say about you is lies, she continued. Because I know who you are. I have watched you tend animals with gentle hands, seen you work through pain without complaint, felt how you build up the fire extra high so I won't be cold. Those aren't the actions of a coward. You don't know. I know enough. She lifted their joined hands, pressed his knuckles to her cheek. I know you're a good man. Calder Reeve, the best I've met. And if the world can't see that, then the world is blind. Something broke in his expression. The careful walls he'd built, brick by brick. Through 3 years of exile, they crumbled. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her shoulder, and shook with the effort of holding back years of unshed tears. She held him, this strong man made vulnerable by kindness, stroked his hair, whispered nothing words of comfort, let him take what he needed, the simple human warmth of another person who saw him clearly and didn't turn away. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet but clear.
I can't,
he struggled for words.
I'm broken, Nora, in ways that might not mend.
We're all broken, she said simply.
That's how the light gets in.
He laughed soft, surprised.
Real.
Eleanor used to say that too.
Then Eleanor was wise, and she'd want—
Nora paused, choosing words carefully.
She'd want you to live. Not just survive. Live.
He studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then, so gentle she might have imagined it, he pressed his lips to her forehead. A blessing. A promise. A beginning. Quilts, he said roughly, standing and pulling her up with him. We were airing quilts. They worked together in the sun, hanging bedding on rope strung between trees. Their hands brushed, reaching for clothespins. Their shoulders touched as they wrestled with heavy fabric. Each contact sent warmth through Nora that had nothing to do with sunshine. As they worked, Calder began to talk, really talk, about his childhood in Tennessee, his mother's garden, how he'd joined the cavalry seeking adventure and found only mud and blood. About Eleanor, how they'd met at a dance in Fort Laramie, her laugh bright as brass buttons. Nora shared, too, her mother's songs, the books she'd hidden under her bed, the moment she'd realized her father would never see her as more than currency. The night she'd decided running into the unknown was better than surrender to the known. By the time they'd finished with the quilts, the sun was setting. They stood together watching it paint the mountains gold and rose. Thank you, Calder said quietly, for reading the journal, for saying what you said, for— He gestured helplessly at the space between them, this new understanding that didn't yet have words.
Thank you,
she replied, for letting me stay, for seeing me as more than what I was running from, for showing me that broken doesn't mean worthless. They walked back to the cabin together, not touching but aware of each other in every step. At the door, Calder paused. That first night, he said, when I warned you leave now or stay forever, I meant it as caution. This place changes people, makes it hard to fit anywhere else.
I know,
Nora said. But now, he looked at her, and she saw something new in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or its close cousin. Possibility. Now I'm glad you stayed. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. So am I. Inside, the cabin waited warm, familiar, theirs. No longer a tomb or a prison, but something else entirely. A home, perhaps, or at least the beginning of one. The morning after their conversation, Nora woke to find Calder already gone. His boots were missing from their usual spot, and fresh snow showed tracks leading to the barn. She dressed quickly, worried that their newfound closeness had frightened him into retreat. But when she entered the barn, she found him brushing Bourbon with unusual care.
"Going somewhere?" she asked.
He glanced up, and she was relieved to see warmth in his eyes.
"Thought I might check the trap lines. Been neglecting them." "I could come."
He paused mid-stroke.
"It's rough travel, cold."
"I've handled worse." He studied her, then nodded.
"Get dressed warm. We'll take Bourbon easier than walking in deep snow."
An hour later, they set out together, Nora seated behind Calder on the patient horse. She'd never ridden double before, and the forced closeness made her pulse quicken. Her arms wrapped around his waist for balance, and she felt him tense, then deliberately relax. The forest stood silent under its white blanket. Their breath and Bourbon's formed clouds in the frigid air. Calder guided them along paths invisible to Nora's eyes, checking snares hidden among the trees. Most were empty, but they collected 2 rabbits and a small fox. "Good fur," he commented, securing the fox to the saddle. "Can trade it come spring." Spring? The word sat between them like a third passenger. At the furthest trap, Calder dismounted to reset the snare. Nora stayed on Bourbon, watching him work. That's when she noticed a movement in the trees, a flash of gray against white. "Calder," she said quietly. He looked up, followed her gaze. A wolf stood 20 yards away, yellow eyes fixed on them. Then another appeared, and another. "Easy," Calder murmured, moving slowly back to the horse. "They're just curious. Probably smell the rabbits." But more wolves emerged from the forest, 5, 6, 7, a full pack, lean with winter hunger. The leader, a massive male with a scarred muzzle, took a step forward. Calder reached for his rifle, movements deliberate and calm. "Hold tight to Bourbon. If I say run, you ride hard back to the cabin. Don't look back."
"I'm not leaving you."
"Nora."
The alpha wolf lunged.
Calder's rifle cracked once, and the wolf tumbled into the snow. The pack scattered, but didn't flee. They circled, looking for weakness. "Get on," Calder commanded, swinging up behind her. Bourbon, well-trained despite his ornery reputation, stood steady. They started back the way they'd come, but the wolves followed, shadows flowing through the trees. One darted in from the left. Calder twisted, fired, missed. The wolf veered away, but 2 more pressed closer on the right. Bourbon snorted, ears flat, but kept moving. "Almost there," Calder said against her ear.
"Cabin's just—"
A wolf burst from a snowbank directly ahead. Bourbon reared. Nora felt herself sliding, grabbed for the saddle horn. Calder's arm came around her waist, holding her secure, while his other hand fought to control the horse. The wolf crouched to spring. No time to reload. Calder drew his knife, ready to meet the attack. A rifle shot echoed through the forest. The wolf dropped mid-leap.
"Get inside!"
A voice bellowed from the cabin direction.
"Move!"
A figure emerged from the trees, a mountain man in furs, already reloading a long rifle. He fired again, and the pack finally broke, melting back into the wilderness. Calder urged Bourbon forward until they reached the cabin clearing. Their savior followed, rifle at ready, in better light. Nora could see him clearly grizzled, weather-beaten, with keen blue eyes and a face like old leather.
"Josiah,"
Calder said, surprise evident.
"What are you—"
"Wolves been tracking me 2 days. The man replied, "Led 'em quite a dance. Didn't mean to bring trouble to your door."
"No trouble. You saved our hides."
Calder dismounted, helped Nora down. "Come in, warm yourself." Inside, while Nora started coffee. The men talked. Josiah Bridger was a trapper Calder had known years back, before Eleanor. He'd been working the high country when the storm hit. "Haven't seen you in town for seasons," Josiah observed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Heard you'd gone hermit." "Heard right." Josiah's eyes shifted to Nora.
Doesn't look so hermit now.
This is Mrs. Callan, Calder said. And Nora noticed he didn't say my wife, but didn't correct the assumption either. She's staying through winter. Mrs. Callan. Josiah touched his fur cap. Pleasure. Any woman who faces down a wolf pack without screaming is worth knowing. As they talked, Nora learned that Josiah brought news from the outside world. The railroad was pushing further west. There'd been Indian troubles to the south, but treaties were holding for now. And... oh, nearly forgot. Josiah dug in his pack. Sheriff in Fort Hanover asked me to keep an eye out. Some rich fellow from Missouri Blackwood. I think he's got men looking for a runaway bride, offering good money for information. Nora's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Calder's expression didn't change.
That so?
He said mildly. $500. They're saying, must be some woman worth that kind of money. Josiah shook his head. Course, any woman with sense to run from Cornelius Blackwood probably had good reason. Man's got a reputation.
What kind of reputation?
Nora asked. Proud when her voice stayed steady. The bad kind. Had 2 wives before. Both died young. Accidents, he claimed. But folks talk. Josiah spat into the fire. Money covers a lot of sins, but not forever. They fed Josiah dinner. Insisted he stay the night. He bedded down by the fire, snoring within minutes. Nora and Calder cleaned up in tense silence.
$500,
she said finally.
That's a fortune out here.
It's blood money.
People have done worse for less.
He turned to face her. You think I'd turn you in after? He gestured helplessly at the space between them. I think $500 could buy a lot of supplies. Fix the roof. Get through next winter easier. Nora. He caught her shoulders, gentle but firm. Look at me. She did, seeing hurt in his eyes. I've lost everything that mattered once. He said, my reputation, my career, my wife, but I never lost myself. Never sold my soul. I won't start now. I'm sorry. When he said the amount... I know. His hand slid down her arms. You're scared. You should be. Blackwood's reach is long. But this is my land, my home. Nobody takes from it unless I allow it, and I don't allow it. She leaned into him, just slightly, and felt his arms come around her. They stood that way, drawing comfort from shared warmth.
What do we tell Josiah?
She whispered. Nothing. He's a good man, but $500 could tempt a saint. Better he doesn't know.
And if others come looking?
Then they'll find what they find. A man and woman making a life in the wilderness. Nothing more, nothing less. She pulled back to see his face.
Is that what we're doing? Making a life?
Something shifted in his expression. I don't know. Are we? Before she could answer, Josiah stirred by the fire, muttering in his sleep. The moment broke. They separated, finished cleaning in silence. But the question lingered in the air between them. The next morning, Josiah left early, loaded with coffee and biscuits for the trail. He promised to stop by on his way back through in spring. Maybe bring supplies from town if they needed. You take care, he told Calder, but his eyes were on Nora. Both of you, winter's got teeth this year. After he left, they found excuse to work separately. Calder in the barn, Nora in the cabin. The wolf attack had shaken something loose, made real the dangers that surrounded them. Not just from animals or weather, but from the world beyond their small sanctuary. That evening, as Nora prepared dinner, she noticed Calder cleaning his rifle with unusual attention. Expecting trouble. Always better to expect it than be surprised by it. She set down her knife. Calder, if my being here puts you in danger... Stop! He looked up. You being here is the first thing that's felt right in 3 years. Whatever comes, we'll face it. Together. Together. She went back to cooking, but her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, she realized.
from something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like hope. That night, she noticed Calder had moved his rifle closer to the bed, and when she settled onto her cot, he'd made good on his promise to bring it in from the barn. She found a small knife tucked under her pillow. "Just in case," he said when she looked at him questioningly. She understood. The wolves had been a reminder the wilderness didn't care about human struggles. It had its own laws, its own violence. And now, with Blackwood's men searching, civilization threatened to intrude with its own kind of savagery. But lying in the dark, listening to Calder's steady breathing across the room, Nora felt safer than she had in years. Not because the danger was less, but because she no longer faced it alone. "Calder," she whispered. Thank you for not being tempted by the money." Silence. Then, "Only thing I'm tempted by in this cabin isn't something Blackwood could buy." Her breath caught, but before she could respond, his breathing deepened into sleep. Or pretended sleep. She lay awake long after, parsing those words, feeling the weight of them. The promise, the threat, the possibility. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, but inside their small cabin, wrapped in darkness and unspoken truths, two broken people continued the slow work of mending themselves, and maybe each other. The letter arrived on a day when the sun finally showed mercy, melting icicles into diamond drops from the cabin eaves. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, moving slow through the remaining snow. Calder saw him first, tensing at the window. "Stay inside," he told Nora, reaching for his rifle. But as the rider drew closer, Calder relaxed marginally. "It's Tom Whelan. Delivers mail when the weather allows." The young man dismounted at a respectful distance, calling out a greeting. Calder met him in the yard while Nora watched from the doorway. "Got a letter here," Tom said, digging in his saddlebag. "Official looking, from Fort Hanover." Calder took the envelope, his face carefully neutral. "Appreciate you riding out." "No trouble, though." Tom glanced toward the cabin, clearly curious about the woman in the doorway. "Folks in town are talking about you having company." "Folks in town talk too much." Tom grinned. "That they do. Well, I'll be heading back, unless you need anything." "We're good." After Tom left, Calder brought the letter inside. The return address showed the territorial sheriff's office. He broke the seal, read silently, his expression darkening with each line. "What is it?" Nora asked. He handed her the letter. Her hands trembled as she read. Asterisk, Mr. Reeve. "It has come to my attention that you may have information regarding the whereabouts of Miss Nora Callan, formerly of Missouri. Her family has expressed great concern for her welfare and has authorized a substantial reward for her safe return. As you were once a man of honor in service to this territory, I trust you will do your duty should you encounter Miss Callan. She may be confused or coerced. Her father assures me she was not of sound mind when she departed. A representative of the family will arrive within the fortnight to investigate reported sightings in the area. Sheriff James McKinnon, Fort Hanover, asterisk." "Not of sound mind," Nora repeated bitterly, "because only a madwoman would refuse Cornelius Blackwood." Calder took the letter back, fed it to the fire. "McKinnon's a good man, but he follows the law, and the law says a father has rights over an unmarried daughter. I'm 23, well past the age of majority. Doesn't matter if they claim you're unfit, Blackwood has judges in his pocket from here to Missouri." He watched the letter burn. "A representative within the fortnight. That's 8, maybe 10 days. I should leave." The words tasted like ash. "You've risked enough." "Where would you go?" He turned to face her. "The passes are still snowed in. Town's the only way out, and they'll be watching. You'd be caught within a day." "Then what do we do?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. Then, "We make you disappear." "I don't understand." "Nora Callan, runaway daughter of a Missouri merchant. She's too easy to find. But a married woman,
settled on a homestead. With a different name, that's someone else entirely. Her breath caught. Calder, what are you saying? He moved to the shelf where he kept important papers, pulled down a small wooden box. From it, he withdrew a folded document. Marriage certificate, he said quietly. Mine and Eleanor's, dated 4 years back. Tom Whelan's young. Never met Eleanor. Neither has the new Sheriff McKinnon came after she died. If I told them you were my wife, showed them this. He set the certificate on the table between them. Names can be changed, dates adjusted. I know a man in the valley who does such work for folks who need new starts. Nora stared at the paper. You're suggesting we pretend? Not pretend. His voice was steady, determined. Make it real, marry proper, but backdated. As far as anyone would know, you've been Mrs. Reeve for months, years even. That's fraud. That's survival. She sank into a chair, mind reeling. You'd do that, risk prison. Ruin what's left of your reputation, for you. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. Nora, these past weeks, I started living again, not just existing living. You did that. Calder, I'm not saying this right. He squeezed her hands, struggling for words. I'm not asking you to be my wife in all ways. Just in name, for protection. We could go on as we are, but with legal standing, a shield against Blackwood. She studied his face, saw the carefully controlled hope there. And if I wanted more than just a name? His breath hitched. Then we'd discuss that, when you're safe, when you're not choosing out of desperation. You think that's what this is, desperation? I think you're backed into a corner. I won't be another man taking advantage of that. She pulled one hand free, touched his scarred cheek. What if I said you're the first man who ever saw me as more than something to be used? What if I said these weeks have been the happiest of my life, despite everything? I'd say you deserve better than a broken-down soldier hiding from the world. And I'd say you deserve better than a runaway who brings danger to your door. Yet here we are. They stayed frozen that way, her hand on his face, his hands holding hers. Finally, Calder spoke again. Think on it. We have a few days before... Yes. He blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to the forgery. Yes to becoming Mrs. Reeve in truth, not just convenience. She smiled tremulously. Yes to whatever that means, whenever you're ready for it to mean something. He turned his face, pressed his lips to her palm. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning, they set out for the valley. The journey took most of the day. Following trails Calder knew from his trading runs. They barely spoke, but Nora felt his presence like a warmth beside her on Bourbon's back. The forger lived in a cabin even more remote than Calder's. He asked no questions, simply took Calder's gold and set to work. Within an hour, they had a marriage certificate dated 8 months prior, with Eleanor's name carefully changed to Nora's. Need witnesses, the man said. I can add names, but living witnesses are better if anyone checks. Josiah Bridger, Calder said immediately. And, he thought, Samuel Littlebear. He trades at Fort Hanover sometimes. Both would swear to this. Josiah might, if I asked. Samuel would he owes me his life from the war. The man nodded, made the additions. There, far as paper's concerned, you've been married since last June. Congratulations. They rode back in gathering darkness. As they neared the cabin, Nora spoke for the first time in hours. We should do it proper too, the real ceremony, even if it's just us. Calder's arms tightened around her briefly. You want words? I want truth between us. Legal papers for the world, but truth for ourselves. Once inside, they stood before the fireplace. Calder took her hands, suddenly looking younger, uncertain. I don't know the proper words, he admitted.
Then use your own. He took a breath. Nora Callan, I take you as my wife, to shelter and protect, to respect and to cherish. I promise to be honest with you, to work beside you, to face whatever comes, together. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Calder Reeve, I take you as my husband, to stand beside, not behind, to help carry your burdens as you help carry mine. I promise to see you truly, to speak honestly, to choose this life we're building, together. No ring, he said apologetically. Don't need one? She squeezed his hands. I have everything I need. He kissed her then, not the desperate passion of novels, but something better, a promise, sealed with tenderness and hope. When they drew apart, both were trembling. Wife, he said softly, testing the word. Husband, she replied. They prepared dinner together, moving with new awareness. Each accidental touch sparked warmth. When their hands met passing dishes, they lingered. The cabin felt different, charged with possibility. That night, as Nora settled onto her cot, Calder spoke from his bed. This doesn't have to change anything. About our sleeping arrangements. I meant what I said about... I know, she smiled in the darkness. Thank you for giving me time, for giving me choice. Always, he promised. But later, when the fire burned low and cold crept through the walls, she heard him get up. A moment later, a thick blanket settled over her existing covers. Can't have my wife catching cold, he murmured. She caught his hand before he could withdraw. Stay, just for a moment. He knelt beside her cot, in the dying firelight. She could just see his face, uncertain, hopeful. Dear, we're really married, she whispered. It feels strange, but good strange. Best strange thing I ever did, he agreed. She lifted their joined hands, pressed them to her cheek. When Blackwood's man comes, we'll be ready. We'll be ready. You're Mrs. Reeve now. Have been for months. Small woman, they might say. Brown hair. Keeps house for her husband up the mountain. Nothing more to tell. Think it will work. Has to. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. I won't let them take you. Nora, not Blackwood, not your father, not the law itself. You're under my protection now. That means something out here. And you're under mine, she said firmly. We protect each other. That's what marriage means. He smiled then, the expression transforming his weathered face. Eleanor would have liked you. Would have said you were exactly what I needed, someone too stubborn to let me waste away in peace. Then I'll try to live up to her faith. He leaned down, pressed a kiss to her forehead. Sleep now. Wife, tomorrow we start spreading the word. Make sure everyone knows Mrs. Reeve is here to stay. As he returned to his bed, Nora pulled the blankets close, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and winter. Outside, wind rattled the windows, but inside, she felt safer than any walls could make her. She was no longer Nora Callan, runaway bride. She was Nora Reeve, chosen wife. And that, she thought as sleep took her, made all the difference. The stranger arrived on the 9th day, just as the morning sun crested the mountains. Nora spotted him first, a lone figure on horseback, picking his way carefully through the melting snow. Her hands stilled on the laundry she was hanging. Calder, she called softly. He emerged from the barn, took one look at her face, and followed her gaze. Without a word, he moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, a united front. The rider was young, perhaps 25, with city clothes ill-suited to mountain travel. As he drew closer, Nora could see the quality of his coat, the shine of his boots. This was no ordinary bounty hunter. Mr. Reeve, the stranger called from a respectful distance. That's me, Calder replied. You're on private land. I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Theodore Marsh.
I represent the interests of Mr. Cornelius Blackwood of Missouri." He dismounted, but made no move to approach further.
"I wonder if I might have a word."
"Say your piece from there."
Marsh nodded, clearly having expected hostility.
"I'm searching for a young woman, Miss Nora Callan, 23 years old, brown hair, approximately this height." He gestured. "She went missing from her father's home some weeks ago. Her family is deeply concerned."
"Can't help you," Calder said flatly. "No one by that name here."
"Perhaps she used another name. You see, she was troubled. Her father fears she may have fallen in with unsavory company or come to harm." Marsh's eyes shifted to Nora. "Ma'am, forgive my asking, but have you seen anyone matching that description?" Nora let her accent slip slightly, Western, roughening her voice. "Just me and my husband here since before the big snow. Haven't seen another soul except the mail rider."
"Your husband," Marsh repeated.
"And you are—" "Mrs. Reeve," she said firmly. "Been married near on 8 months now." "I see." Marsh pulled out a leather notebook. "Would you mind if I verified that simply for my report? You understand, Mr. Blackwood is quite thorough." Calder's hand moved to rest on his rifle, though he didn't lift it. "You calling my wife a liar?" "Not at all, but Miss Callan was known to be creative with the truth. Her father mentioned she might claim to be married to avoid returning home." "A lucky thing we got papers then." Calder said, "Nora, fetch the certificate." She went inside, hearing Calder continue. "Though I don't much care for showing my private business to every stranger who rides up." "I understand completely," Marsh said smoothly. "But surely you can appreciate a father's concern, mister. Callan is beside himself with worry." Nora returned with the forged certificate, handing it to Calder, who passed it to Marsh without letting him come closer. The young man studied it carefully. "June wedding," he murmured. "Witnesses, Josiah Bridger and Samuel Littlebear." "You know them?" Calder asked, a challenge in his voice. "I could find them, verify their accounts. Josiah's trapping up north, won't be back till spring thaw. Samuel's with his people, could be anywhere." Calder shrugged. "Course, you're welcome to search the whole territory. Might take you a few months." Marsh handed back the certificate. "Mrs. Reeve, where did you say you were from originally?" "Didn't say," Nora replied. "But since you're asking, Virginia. Came west with my folks 5 years back. They died of fever 2 winters ago." "I'm sorry for your loss. And where did you meet Mr. Reeve?" "Fort Hanover. I was working at the boarding house after my folks passed." "A Mrs. Weatherby's place." It was a test. Nora had never been to Fort Hanover. Didn't know if there was a Mrs. Weatherby, but she'd learned to bluff from watching her father's business dealings. "No, Mrs. Garrett's, down by the river. Closed now, though she moved back east last summer." Marsh made a note. Whether she'd guessed right or wrong, she couldn't tell from his expression. "One more question," he said. "The woman I'm looking for has a distinctive scar on her left hand. Childhood accident with a kitchen knife. Would you mind showing me your hands?" Nora's heart stopped. She did have a scar on her left hand from exactly such an accident when she was 8. How could Blackwood know such a detail? Calder stepped slightly forward. "That's enough. You've seen our papers, heard our answers. Time for you to move on." "I meant no offense." "None taken. But my wife's not some horse to be inspected. You want to check scars. You better have a warrant from a judge." His hand shifted on the rifle. "We're done here." Marsh studied them both, calculation in his eyes. "Of course. My apologies for disturbing your morning." He mounted his horse with practiced ease. "Though I should mention, Mr. Blackwood is offering $500 for information leading to Miss Callan's return. Should you hear anything?" "We'll keep our own counsel." Calder said, "As you wish." Marsh touched his hat to Nora. Mrs. Reeve. Mr. Reeve. Good day. They watched him ride away until he disappeared into the tree line. Only then did Nora allow her knees to buckle. Calder caught her, guided her inside.
He knows, she whispered. The scar, how could he know about that?
Your father told him, identifying marks. Calder poured her coffee with steady hands, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. But knowing and proving are different things. He didn't believe us. Doesn't matter what he believes. Matters what he can demonstrate to a judge. He sat across from her. You did good. That bit about Mrs. Garrett inspired.
A lucky guess, but Calder, he'll check. He'll go to Fort Hanover, ask questions.
Let him. By the time he gets there and back, it'll be full spring. Josiah might actually be around by then, and I can get word to him. He reached across the table, took her scarred hand. We knew this would come. We're ready. Are we? He's not some rough bounty hunter. He's smart, educated. Blackwood sent his best. Then we'll have to be better. A sound outside made them both freeze hoofbeats. Returning, Calder moved to the window, peered out carefully. He's back, but not alone. Nora joined him. Marsh had returned with another rider older, weathered, wearing a sheriff's badge. McKinnon, Calder muttered. Marsh went straight to the law. They met the two men in the yard again. Sheriff McKinnon dismounted heavily, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. Calder, he said with a nod. Ma'am, sorry to trouble you, but Mr. Marsh here made some concerning claims. Said you were harboring a runaway. Sheriff, you saw our marriage certificate, Calder said calmly. My wife's been here months. This man's chasing shadows. McKinnon sighed. I know. But he's insisting I search the property. Says the young lady he's looking for might be held against her will. Against her will? Nora laughed, letting anger color her voice. Sheriff, do I look like a prisoner I cook, clean, tend my home? I chose my husband. What kind of place is this where a man can ride up and call a married woman a runaway? Now, ma'am, no one's calling you anything, McKinnon said placatingly. But the law says I got to investigate claims like this. How about you just show Mr. Marsh your hands? Let him see you're not who he's looking for, and we can all get on with our day. Nora felt Calder tense beside her. This was the test. If she refused, it would look suspicious. If she showed the scar. She stepped forward, pulling off her work gloves with deliberate slowness. This is insulting, Sheriff, but if it'll get these men off our land. She held out her hands, palms down. The scar on her left hand stood out white against her work-roughened skin. Marsh's eyes lit with triumph. That's her mark, Sheriff. I demand you arrest this woman immediately. She's Nora Callan, and she... That's Mrs. Reeve, Calder interrupted, steel in his voice. And lots of folks have scars. I've got a dozen myself. You planning to arrest everyone with marked skin? McKinnon looked deeply unhappy. Calder's got a point. Mr. Marsh, a scar's not proof of identity. Combined with her appearance, her age, the timing. Circumstantial, Calder said. Sheriff, you know me. Know I served this territory with honor. Whatever lies got told later. You're really going to let some city boy come here and accuse my wife based on a scar? McKinnon shifted his weight. Known Calder near on 10 years. He told Marsh, if he says this is his wife, that carries weight with me. More weight than the law, Marsh demanded. The law requires evidence, not speculation. McKinnon turned to Nora. Ma'am, I apologize for this intrusion, but I got to ask, are you here of your own free will? You want to go with this man? I want him off our land, Nora said firmly. I want to go back to my washing. I want to cook dinner for my husband in peace. That's all I want. Sheriff? McKinnon nodded slowly. There you have it, mister. Marsh, Lady says she's where she wants to be, without more proof than a scar and your suspicions. I got no cause to do anything." "This is a mistake, Sheriff," Marsh said coldly. "Mr. Blackwood has influence, judges, governors, and they're all back in Missouri." McKinnon cut him off. "This is Wyoming territory. We do things different here." He mounted his horse. "I'll escort you back to town. Make sure you find the road out. Suggest you take it." Marsh looked between them all. Fury barely contained. "This isn't over. I'll be back with proper warrants. More men. The truth will out. Miss Callan." "Safe travels, Mr. Marsh," Calder said evenly. "Watch for wolves. They're hungry this time of year." After the men left, Nora sank onto the porch steps. Calder sat beside her, gathering her into his arms. She shook against him, reaction setting in. "You did it," he murmured. "Face them down like you were born to it." "He'll be back. You heard him." "Maybe, but it'll take time to get warrants, especially without McKinnon's support, and by then—" He pulled back to look at her. "By then, we'll be so established as man and wife that no judge would dare separate us. Not out here." "You sound sure." "I am sure, because I won't let them take you. Nora, not now, not ever." His hand cupped her face. "You're my wife. That means something to me. Everything." She turned into his palm, kissing it softly. "Show me." "What?" "Show me we're married. Really married. Not just for papers and pretense." She met his eyes. "I'm tired of being afraid. Calder, tired of holding back. If they're going to come for us anyway, I want whatever time we have to be real. Complete." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by concern. "Nora, you're scared. Shaken up. This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time." She stood, pulling him up with her. "I've spent my whole life waiting for the right time, the proper moment. It never comes. There's only now." He searched her face. "You're sure?" "I've been sure since the night you warned me what staying meant. I chose then. I choose now." She smiled tremulously. Unless you don't want." He silenced her with a kiss. Different from their wedding kiss. This one held heat, promise, years of loneliness ending. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "Want," he said roughly. "Nora, I've wanted since you walked through that door looking like winter's own revenge. But I hoped we'd have time. Courtship, proper romance." "We're already married," she pointed out. "Seems we did things backward from the start." "That we did." He lifted her hand, kissed the scar Marsh had tried to use against her. "My brave wife, my beautiful, brave wife." They went inside together, closing the door firmly on the outside world. What happened next was theirs alone, a claiming, a choosing, a promise made flesh. Two people who'd been broken by life, finding in each other the missing pieces needed to become whole. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the tracks of unwelcome visitors. But inside the cabin, warmth reigned. And for the first time since she'd run into the winter night, Nora Callan Nora Reeve felt truly, completely safe. She was home. The days following Marsh's visit passed in watchful peace. Nora and Calder moved through their routines with new awareness not just of potential danger, but of each other. The careful distance they'd maintained for weeks had vanished, replaced by something tender and strong. "We should go to town," Calder announced one morning, a week after Marsh's departure. "Show ourselves. Let people see Mrs. Reeve doing her marketing." Nora looked up from the bread she was shaping. "Is that wise? What if Marsh has men watching?" "That's exactly why we need to go. Hiding makes us look guilty. Going about our business like normal folk, that's what innocent people do." She considered this, then nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow. If weather holds, we need supplies anyway." The next morning dawned clear and cold. Nora dressed carefully in her best dress, Eleanor's dress, really, but altered to fit. She pinned her hair up properly, added the small cameo brooch Calder had surprised her with from Eleanor's things. "You look—" Calder paused in the doorway, taking her in, like a proper town wife.
That's the idea, isn't it?
He crossed to her, tilted her chin up. "You look beautiful and brave, and I'm proud to walk beside you." The ride to Fort Hanover took 4 hours. As they descended from the mountains, the landscape opened up, revealing the small settlement nestled in the valley. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Nora could see people moving along the muddy main street. "Remember," Calder murmured as they approached, "you've been here before. You know these people." "Mrs. Garrett's boarding house by the river," she recited, "where I worked after my parents died." "Good. And if anyone asks about scars or identifying marks, I laugh and show them 3 more from kitchen work, common as dirt for women who cook." He squeezed her hand. "You'll do fine." Fort Hanover was larger than Nora expected, 24 buildings lining the main street, with more scattered beyond. The general store dominated one corner, while a modest church anchored the other. People turned to watch as they rode in, curiosity plain on their faces. Calder helped her down in front of the store, his hands lingering on her waist. "Head high," he whispered. "You belong here." Inside, the store was warm and crowded with goods. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger. "Calder Reeve," he said with surprise. "Haven't seen you in, must be 2 seasons now." "Been busy. Martin, like you to meet my wife, Nora." Martin's eyebrows rose. "Wife, well, I'll be—" "When did this happen?" "Last summer," Nora said, stepping forward with a smile. "Pleased to meet you. Calder's told me your store has the best goods in the territory." Kind of him to say. Martin studied her with undisguised interest. "Welcome to Fort Hanover, Mrs. Reeve. What can I help you with today?" They moved through the store, Nora selecting items while aware of every eye upon her. Women who'd been examining fabric stopped to stare. Men at the counter paused their conversations. "Sugar," she told Martin. "Flour, salt, coffee. Do you have any cinnamon?" Calder has a sweet tooth, though he'd deny it. This earned a chuckle from Martin and a mock glare from Calder. Good. Domestic details made them real. Established. "That's quite a list," Martin said as he tallied. "Setting up housekeeping proper. Are you—" "Been managing with what was there," Nora replied. "But a home needs a woman's touch, don't you think?" "Indeed it does. Poor Calder's been rattling around that cabin alone too long. We all worried." He trailed off, glancing at Calder. "That I'd turn into a hermit," Calder supplied dryly. "Nearly did. Lucky for me. Nora took pity on a gruff mountain man." "Lucky for both of us," she corrected, linking her arm through his. As Martin wrapped their purchases, the store door chimed. Sheriff McKinnon entered, pausing when he saw them. "Reeve, Mrs. Reeve," he touched his hat. "Doing some shopping." "Day for it," Calder replied evenly. "How's the peacekeeping business, Sheriff?" "Quiet, mostly. That fellow Marsh left town 2 days back, headed east, far as I know." McKinnon's eyes lingered on Nora. "Seemed mighty put out that I wouldn't arrest folks on his say-so." "Imagine that," Nora said lightly. "A lawman following the law." McKinnon's mouth twitched. "Yes, ma'am. Funny how that works." He moved past them to the counter. "Martin, need to order more ammunition. Spring brings all sorts out of the woodwork." The warning was subtle but clear. They finished their purchases and loaded the wagon Calder had brought. As they prepared to leave, a woman approached middle-aged, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone important. "Mr. Reeve," she called. "A moment, please." Calder tensed, but kept his voice neutral. "Mrs. Pemberton, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to meet your wife." She studied Nora with sharp eyes. "I'm Agnes Pemberton. My husband runs the bank." "Pleased to meet you," Nora said, offering her hand. Mrs. Pemberton took it, her grip firm. "You're younger than I expected, and prettier. Where did you say you were from?" "Virginia, originally. My family came west 5 years ago." "And where did you meet our mysterious Mr. Reeve?" "Here in town. I was working at Mrs. Garrett's boarding house after my parents passed." Mrs. Pemberton's expression revealed nothing. "Funny. I don't recall seeing you at church or any of the town socials. I kept to myself mostly. Grief, you understand." "Of course." The woman's tone suggested she understood nothing of the sort. "Well, you must come to tea sometime. I host a ladies' gathering every Thursday. You could meet the other wives." It was a test, Nora realized. Accept, and she'd be exposed to questioning by the town's gossips. Decline, and she'd seem unsociable, suspicious. "How kind," she said warmly. "Though I'm afraid the journey from the cabin is quite long. Perhaps when the weather improves. Spring, then I'll hold you to it." Mrs. Pemberton smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "After all, we must make you feel welcome. The wife of one of our war heroes deserves no less." Calder's jaw tightened at war hero, but he said nothing. They made their farewells and left town, both aware of watching eyes following their departure. Once they'd cleared the settlement, Nora let out a long breath. "That woman knows something's not right." Agnes Pemberton knows everything about everyone, or thinks she does. Calder guided the wagon around a muddy hole. "But knowing and proving are different things." "Yes, you keep saying that." "Because it's true. Suspicion isn't evidence. Gossip isn't law." They rode in silence for a while, climbing back toward the mountains. Then Nora spoke again. "Mrs. Garrett's boarding house was burned down last fall. Convenient, that. And Mrs. Garrett moved back east to live with her daughter. Also convenient." Despite everything, Nora laughed. "You planned this well." "Had to. Your life depends on the details holding up." "My life?" She looked at him. "Calder, if this goes wrong, they won't just take me. You'll be charged with harboring a fugitive, lying to law enforcement, forgery." "I know the risks." "Do you? Because I couldn't bear—" Her voice broke. He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. "Nora, listen to me. Before you came, I was dead. Walking, breathing, but dead inside. You brought me back to life. Whatever happens, that's worth any risk." "But—" "No buts. We're in this together. That's what marriage means." He cupped her face. "That's what love means." The word hung between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Love? What else would you call it, this thing that's grown between us?" His thumb brushed away a tear. "I love you, Nora Reeve. Maybe since that first night, when you chose to close the door instead of running. Definitely since you stayed through my fever, read to me in the evenings, made my tomb into a home again. Calder." She leaned into his touch. "I love you too. So much it frightens me. I've never had anything to lose before." "You won't lose me," he promised. "Or this life we're building, I swear it." She kissed him then, there on the mountain road with snow all around and the town's gossips far behind. When they parted, both were smiling through tears. "Home?" he asked. "Home," she agreed. They reached the cabin as shadows lengthened across the snow. Together they unloaded supplies, Nora chattering about organizing the pantry while Calder made approving noises. Normal, domestic talk that felt like armor against the outside world. That night, as they lay entwined in the bed they now shared, Nora traced the scars on Calder's chest by firelight. "Tell me about the war," she said softly. "The real story, not what others say." So he did, talked about dust and blood, orders that made no sense, good men dying for bad reasons, about holding a position for 6 hours with 7 men against 40, waiting for reinforcements that never came because the captain had fled at first contact, about being the only survivor, and how that survival had been twisted into cowardice by men protecting their own guilt. "I dream about it sometimes," he admitted. "Their faces, the ones who didn't make it." "Heroes carry the hardest burdens," she murmured, "because they remember when others choose to forget." "I'm no hero, Nora." "You are to me." She kissed the scar over his heart. "My hero, who gave me shelter and dignity and love when the world would have destroyed me." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "We saved each other, then—" "Yes," she agreed, "we did." Outside, wind howled through the pines, but inside their cabin, their home, two people who'd found each other against all odds, held tight and let love be stronger than fear. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Marsh might return, Mrs. Pemberton might dig deeper. The truth might surface despite their careful lies. But tonight, they had each other, and that was enough. That was everything. Spring crept into the mountains slowly, melting snow revealing patches of brown earth. Nora knelt in what would become her garden, fingers working the soil Eleanor had once tended. The seeds from the root cellar waited in careful rows beside her beans. Squash, flowers that would bloom in colors she could only imagine. "Starting early," Calder observed, bringing her coffee. "These need every growing day they can get." She sat back on her heels, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Your Eleanor knew what she was doing, saving seeds suited to this elevation. "Our Eleanor," he corrected gently. "This is her gift to you, to us." Nora smiled, touched by his inclusion of her in that sacred memory. Over the months, Eleanor had transformed from a ghost between them to a benevolent presence, blessing their unexpected happiness. "The ground's still cold," she said, "but I thought I'd start with—" The sound of approaching horses cut her off. Multiple horses, moving fast. Calder was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand before she could blink. "Inside," he ordered. But before they could move, riders burst from the tree line. 6 men, hard-faced and armed. At their head rode someone Nora recognized with a sinking heart, Theodore Marsh. But it was the man beside him that made her blood freeze. Her father. Charles Callan sat his horse like a man 20 years younger, his face carved from granite, his eyes, the same brown as Nora's, fixed on her with cold fury. "Nora," he said, voice carrying across the yard. "Enough of this foolishness. You're coming home." "Mr. Callan." Calder stepped partially in front of her. "You're trespassing on private property." "I'm collecting what's mine." Charles replied, "Stand aside. Reeve, this doesn't concern you." "My wife concerns me greatly." "Your wife?" Charles laughed, harsh and bitter. "This charade has gone on long enough. I know all about your forged documents, your hired witnesses. Did you think Blackwood's money couldn't buy truth?" Marsh produced a paper with official seals. Warrant from Judge Morrison in Cheyenne. For the arrest of Nora Callan on charges of theft, she took jewelry belonging to the Blackwood family. And for Calder Reeve, charges of kidnapping, forgery, and corrupting a young woman of good family. "Lies," Nora said, finding her voice. "I took nothing but what was mine." "The engagement ring, the necklace Cornelius gave you." Her father's voice dripped contempt. "Those were Blackwood property, given in expectation of marriage. By breaking the engagement, you became a thief." "I left them behind on my dresser." "Where—" She stopped.
seeing the trap. Of course the jewelry was gone. Cornelius had likely pocketed it himself, creating evidence of her theft. "Enough talk," one of the riders said. "We've come a long way for this bounty." "Bounty hunters." Calder's voice held disgust. "This the company you keep now, Callan?" "Whatever it takes to save my daughter from ruin." Charles dismounted, approaching slowly. "Nora, you've shamed our family, destroyed a beneficial alliance, cost me thousands in business, but I'm willing to forgive. Come now, and Cornelius will still have you. He's generously overlooking your indiscretion." "Indiscretion?" Nora stepped around Calder despite his protective gesture. "Is that what you call choosing my own life? I call it the tantrum of a spoiled child. You had everything: wealth, position, a future most women would kill for, and you threw it away for what this?" He gestured at the cabin, the garden, Calder, a disgraced soldier in a mountain shack. "A home," she said firmly. "A husband who sees me as a person, not a transaction. Work that means something. Yes, Father, I chose this." "Then you're more fool than I thought." He nodded to his men. "Take her." The bounty hunters started forward. Calder raised his rifle, and suddenly the yard bristled with weapons. "First man to touch her dies," Calder said calmly. 6 against 1, Marsh scoffed. "Those aren't good odds. Reeve?" 7, actually. Everyone turned. Josiah Bridger emerged from the barn, long rifle trained on the group. Behind him, 2 more figures appeared, rough men Nora didn't recognize, but clearly friends of Josiah's. "Happened to be passing," Josiah said conversationally. "Heard there might be trouble up this way. Can't abide claim jumpers and wife stealers." "We have legal warrants," Marsh protested. "From a judge 2 territories away. That paper's worth less than kindling here." Josiah spat. "Way I see it, you're just a pack of armed men threatening a married couple. That's called banditry in these parts." The tension stretched taut. 6 men with profit in mind against 4 defending home and principle. Nora saw her father's hand inch toward his coat. "Please," she said, stepping forward. "Father, please, no blood, not over me." "Then come quietly, end this madness." "I can't, won't." She took a breath, played her last card. "I'm pregnant." Silence fell like a hammer blow. She felt Calder stiffen behind her. They'd never discussed children, though it was possible. Her monthly time was late, had been for weeks. Charles Callan's face went white. "You're lying." "Maybe, maybe not. Want to risk dragging your grandchild back to Cornelius Blackwood? Think he'll raise another man's baby with kindness?" She let that sink in. "You know what he is. Father, what he did to his other wives. You just chose not to see because the money blinded you."
"Nora."
"I've made my choice. I have a good life here, a real marriage. If you force me back, I'll fight every step. I'll tell everyone in Missouri how you sold your daughter. I'll shame the Callan name so thoroughly. No decent family will do business with you again."
"You wouldn't dare."
"Try me." She met his stare steadily. "I'm not the obedient daughter you remember. This mountain, this man, this life, they've made me strong. Strong enough to face you down." Charles looked between her and Calder, calculation in his eyes. The profit from Blackwood against the loss of reputation. The possibility of a grandchild raised by his enemy. The very real guns pointed at his men. "The warrant's still valid," Marsh interjected. "The theft charges—"
"Shut up,"
Charles snapped.
"This is family business now."
He walked closer, stopping just out of Calder's reach. "Is it true about the baby?" "Does it matter? I'm not leaving either way."
"It matters to me."
For the first time, she saw something human crack through his business facade.
"I had plans for you, Nora. Good plans. This—"
He gestured helplessly. "Your plans, never mine." She softened slightly. "Father, I know you thought you were doing right, securing my future, but your right was my prison. Can't you see that
He was quiet for a long moment. Then, your mother would have hated this, you living rough, working like a servant.
Mother would have understood. She married you for love. Remember, before you had money, before you forgot what that meant.
That hit home. Charles flinched, looking older suddenly. Blackwood won't give up. His reach is long.
Then we'll face what comes, together.
She reached back, found Calder's hand.
That's what marriage truly means.
Charles studied them both.
You really love him, this disgraced soldier? With all my heart. And he loves me. That's worth more than all Blackwood's gold.
Love. He said it like a foreign word.
I loved once, before business consumed everything.
A long pause. Your mother had your stubbornness. Never could talk her out of anything once she'd decided. Then you know I won't be talked out of this. He sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his years. The warrant, it's real. The charges will stand unless
I withdraw the complaint. Say the jewelry was a gift, freely given. Without that, Blackwood has no theft case. And without theft, the rest falls apart.
Hope bloomed in Nora's chest.
Would you do that?
I'm considering it. He looked at Calder. You'll protect her, provide for her. With my life, Calder said simply. And this child, if there is one, will be loved and raised right. Have my word on that. Charles nodded slowly. I need to think. He turned to his men. We're leaving now.
But Mr. Callan,
Marsh protested. The bounty. There is no bounty. Not anymore. His voice carried the iron that had built his fortune. Anyone who pursues this further will answer to me. And I have longer reach than even Blackwood when roused. The hunters grumbled but backed down. Money talked. And Charles Callan clearly had the louder voice. They began mounting their horses. Charles paused beside his own mount. I won't withdraw the complaint today, or tomorrow, but in a month, maybe 2, I'll send word that it was all a misunderstanding. The jewelry was indeed a gift. By then, Blackwood will have found another girl to terrorize.
Father,
don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. But his eyes said different. Take care. Nora, don't make me regret this mercy. He mounted stiffly, gathered his reins. Then, almost too quiet to hear, write to me sometimes. Let me know about the child, if there is one.
I will, she promised.
The group rode away, Marsh arguing until the last. Josiah and his friends waited until they were well gone before lowering their weapons. Well, Josiah said cheerfully.
That was interesting. Congratulations on the baby.
By the way, Nora blushed.
I'm not certain. Course you are. Got that look about you. My Sarah had the same glow with our first.
He winked at Calder.
Better start adding on to that cabin, friend.
After Josiah left with thanks and coffee, Nora and Calder stood alone in their yard. She couldn't meet his eyes.
I'm sorry, she said, about saying, I'm not sure, but I might be, and it seemed the only way to.
He silenced her with a kiss, deep and thorough. When they parted, he was smiling. You brilliant woman, you faced down your father and 6 armed men with nothing but words and courage. He touched her still flat belly gently. And if there is a child,
then we'll love it. Raise it here, free and strong.
And if there isn't,
then we'll keep trying until there is.
She blushed at her boldness, but didn't look away. I want your children. Calder Reeve. Want to fill this cabin with laughter and chaos and love. Eleanor always wanted children, he said softly. We tried, but it never happened. She would have been happy knowing life would grow here again. Then let's make her happy. Let's make us happy. She looked at the prepared garden soil.
Let's plant everything seeds, dreams, babies. Let's make this mountain bloom.
He laughed, lifting her off her feet, spinning her in the spring sunshine. Mrs. Reeve, I do believe you're proposing we live happily ever after.
Is that so shocking?
Not shocking, miraculous. He set her down gently.
6 months ago, I was a dead man walking. Now I have a wife, possibly a child, and a future. You're my miracle. Nora.
We're each other's miracle. They went inside together, leaving the garden for tomorrow. There would be time now, time to plant, to grow, to build. Charles Callan had given them that gift, however grudgingly. That night, as they lay entwined, Calder asked,
"Do you really think you're pregnant?" "I don't know. Maybe. My monthly time is late, but that could be the stress, the change." She traced patterns on his chest. "Would it bother you if I'd lied about that?"
"Nothing you did today bothers me. You saved us with quick thinking and brave words." He kissed her forehead. "But I hope it's true. I hope we made life in this place that's seen too much death. We'll know soon enough."
"Yes."
His hand covered her belly protectively. "We will." Outside, nightbirds called to each other across the valley. But inside, two people who'd found love in the wilderness dreamed of the future of gardens blooming, children laughing, and a life lived freely under the vast Montana sky. The threat hadn't ended entirely. Blackwood might still cause trouble, but for now, they had peace. They had each other. They had hope. Summer arrived in full glory, painting the mountains in shades of green and gold. The garden Nora had planted flourished beyond her wildest hopes. Beans climbed makeshift poles. Squash vines spread across the ground, and flowers bloomed in riots of color that would have made Eleanor proud. Nora stood among the growing things, one hand resting on her belly that now showed the unmistakable curve of new life. The pregnancy she'd suspected in spring was real, and Calder treated her like spun glass despite her protests that mountain women had been working while pregnant since time began.
"The fence needs mending,"
she called to him as he chopped wood.
"The deer got into the lettuce again last night."
"I'll get to it," he promised, setting aside his axe to bring her water.
"After you rest, doctor's orders."
"The doctor said I'm healthy as one of your horses. Healthier. Probably Bourbon's getting fat on summer grass." Calder smiled, that easy expression that came readily now. The shadows that had haunted his eyes when she first arrived had faded, replaced by contentment and anticipation. "Speaking of the doctor," he said, "we should head to town tomorrow. You need more of that tonic he prescribed."
"And fabric," she added. "The baby will need clothes."
"The baby already has a full wardrobe, thanks to you."
"A few more things won't hurt."
She leaned against him, enjoying the solid warmth.
"Besides, I want to stop at the post office. See if Father wrote back."
It had taken her 3 weeks to work up the courage to write to Charles Callan, telling him about the pregnancy, assuring him of her happiness. His response, when it came, had been brief but not unkind, acknowledging her news, confirming he'd withdrawn the theft charges, and mentioning that Cornelius Blackwood had indeed found a new target for his attention, a banker's daughter from Denver, apparently, who hopefully had less spine than Nora.
"We could stay the night in town,"
Calder suggested. "Doc Matthews offered us the room above his surgery. Might be good to be closer to help when your time comes."
"My time's not for months yet, and I want our child born here, where we chose to build our life."
He kissed the top of her head. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't love me any other way."
"True enough."
That evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and rose, they heard horses approaching. Calder reached for his rifle out of habit, but relaxed when he recognized the riders Sheriff McKinnon and, surprisingly, Samuel Littlebear, the Shoshone trader who'd been listed as witness to their marriage. "Evening, folks," McKinnon called out. "Sorry to disturb your peace." "No disturbance," Calder said, rising to greet them. "Samuel, good to see you. It's been too long." The native man dismounted with easy grace, his dark eyes crinkling with humor. "Too long indeed, my friend. And this must be the wife I witnessed you marry last summer." Nora shot Calder a quick glance, but he seemed calm. "My wife, Nora, this is Samuel. He saved my life more than once during the Troubles." "Ma'am." Samuel touched his hat brim. "Calder wrote me about needing someone to verify your marriage. I was happy to confirm what I witnessed." Understanding dawned. Calder had reached out to his old friend, ensuring their story would hold if questioned. Samuel was providing cover, just as Josiah had. "Thank you," she said simply. "Would you like coffee I just made fresh?" As they settled around the outdoor table Calder had built, McKinnon explained their visit. "Got a letter from the territorial governor. Seems there's been some official inquiries about you folks. A Mr. Blackwood has been making noise about kidnapping and such." "My father withdrew those charges," Nora said quickly. "He did indeed, but Blackwood's not satisfied. He's pushing for an investigation, claiming Calder here coerced both you and your father." McKinnon sipped his coffee. "Governor wanted me to look into it, make a report." And Calder's voice was steady, but Nora saw his hand tighten on his cup. "And I'm here to report that Mr. and Mrs. Calder Reeve are upstanding citizens, legally married as witnessed, expecting their first child, and bothering nobody." The sheriff smiled. "That ought to satisfy the governor and anybody else who asks." "Even Blackwood." "Especially Blackwood. Man needs to learn that money doesn't buy everything." McKinnon stood. "Congratulations on the coming baby. By the way, town could use more young ones." After the men left, with Samuel promising to visit again before winter, Nora found herself near tears of relief. "It's over," she whispered. "Really over." "Looks that way." Calder pulled her close. "Though I suspect Blackwood will find other ways to make himself miserable without our help." Poor Denver banker's daughter. "Indeed, but that's not our concern anymore." He rested his hand on her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. "We have our own future to think about now." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. As Nora worked in the garden, she heard someone call out a woman's voice, uncertain and tired. A young woman stood at the edge of the clearing, travel-worn and obviously exhausted. She couldn't have been more than 18, with red hair escaping from a proper bonnet and clothes that spoke of city origins. "Please," she said when she saw Nora. "I'm looking for the Reeve homestead. Are you Mrs. Reeve?" "I am." Nora set down her basket, approached carefully. "Are you in trouble, Miss—" The girl's composure crumbled. "I didn't know where else to go. They said in town that you might understand, that you'd—" She swayed on her feet. Nora caught her, called for Calder. Together they got the girl inside, settled her with water and food. Her story came out in pieces. Her name was Margaret O'Brien, lately of Chicago. She'd been engaged to a man her parents chose, a cruel man who'd shown his true nature too late. She'd run, like Nora had run, but with nowhere to go and no plan beyond escape. "I heard in Fort Hanover about you," Margaret said. "How you stood up to your family, made your own choice. I thought maybe you could tell me how to be that brave." Nora exchanged glances with Calder, who nodded slightly. "Stay tonight," Nora offered. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Margaret stayed 3 days. During that time, Nora helped her think through her options. There was work in town for a woman willing to learn the seamstress needed help, or the schoolteacher who was getting on in years. Or she could go further west, to California where nobody knew her story. "What would you do?" Margaret asked as they prepared her for departure. "I found my place," Nora said, looking around the cabin that had become home. "But that doesn't mean it's your place. Only you can decide where you belong." In the end, Margaret chose California. Calder arranged safe passage with a family heading that way, and Nora gave her what money they could spare. As the wagon pulled away, Margaret called back,
Thank you for showing me it's possible. Think we'll get more visitors like her? Calder asked as they watched the dust settle.
Maybe. Would that bother you?
No. He put his arm around her. This place was a refuge for you when you needed it. Seems right to offer the same to others, when we can. Eleanor would approve, Nora said softly.
Yes, he agreed. She would. As autumn approached and Nora's time drew nearer, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Calder built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth as silk. Nora sewed tiny clothes and blankets, humming the lullabies her mother had sung. One evening, as first snow dusted the peaks, Calder found her standing by the window, hands cradling her belly. "What are you thinking?" he asked.
About circles, she said. How I walked through that door desperate and alone. How our child will be born here, surrounded by love. How what started as an ending became a beginning.
"The best beginning,"
he agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Remember what you told me that first night, leave now, or stay forever? I remember. She turned in his arms, facing him with eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm so glad I stayed. So am I, love, so am I. They stood together, watching snow begin to fall in earnest. Soon they'd be sealed in for another winter. But this time, they faced it without fear. They had warmth, food, each other, and soon, a child to fill the cabin with new life. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, the fire burned bright and steady. On the mantel sat the Shakespeare book, well worn from evening readings. In the corner stood the cradle, waiting, and by the door hung two coats side by side, his heavy canvas, her warm wool ready for whatever weather came.
"The cabin's too quiet when you're not here," Calder said suddenly,
echoing words from months past. Nora smiled, remembering her response. She turned, closed the door against the growing storm, and this time she locked it from the inside with deep satisfaction. Good thing I'm not going anywhere then, she said.
Good thing indeed.
They prepared dinner together, moving in easy harmony. Outside, winter began its familiar siege, but inside their small cabin, two people who'd saved each other from loneliness and despair created their own warmth. And in the spring, when the snow melted and the garden bloomed again, their child would be born into a world of love and chosen family, a living testament to the power of closing one door and opening another. The girl who had walked until her shoes split open had found her home. The man who had warned her away had become her greatest blessing. Sometimes the best stories begin with the hardest choices. Sometimes staying forever is exactly what we need. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Nora and Calder's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 like this video, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of courage, love, and freedom in the Old West, the